Hey, welcome to my YouTube channel, Exploring with Jason. Come along with me as we are exploring Akron haunted locations.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, sounds good. So what we are on, this is Main Street, but it was not always a street. It was the Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. And the interesting thing about it is, so City of Akron was not established until 1825. 2 years later, a plague almost wiped out the city. And the plague became because during the creation of the Ohio and the Erie Canal, they drained some of the lakes to create the locks, and there was a killer fog that came off of the drained lakes because there was methane from the fish and the vegetation that were decomposing from that were no longer exposed to water. That didn't kill them though. That killer fog, it just smelled bad, but it wasn't toxic. Instead, the decomposition caused insects and contamination of water. So there was cholera, typhus fever, and malaria. The workers on the canal were largely Irishmen, immigrants who came in looking for opportunity. Unfortunately, because of this, a lot of them died from poor treatment, harsh work conditions, and then also just like the plague that was spread across the city. There's a dead Irishman for every mile, they say. It also wiped out the city. People were fleeing this plague. Akron didn't reestablish its population until a year later. And the workers, interestingly enough, had Montezuma's necklaces around their necks. They were tin smudge pots that would create this like smoke cloud that would dissipate the insects. And it did help them because insects don't like smoke, but it did scar their necks forevermore.
So, down East Market Street, next to Grace Park, and where the Haven of Rest Shelter is where the old Akron Union Depot used to be. That is where the Doodlebug train. This is one of the more famous stories here in Akron area. The Doodlebug train, commuter train, was heading there from Hudson. But on July 31st, a freight train also passed the Union Depot, heading on the same tracks in the opposite direction. The Doodlebug engineers had orders that informed them that they were sharing the rails with this freight train, and freight train was good though. I'm gonna edit that one back in on purpose. And that they should have waited at Silver Lake for the larger train to pass, but for some reason they did not. Answers range from they just messed up to carbon monoxide poisoning. The engineers all bailed out on the train as they saw the larger freight train coming, but all 43 of the passengers were killed as the gas-powered Doodlebug exploded upon impact with the larger train. They never made it to the Union Depot on East Market Street where their families were waiting for them after their day's work. And we are going to take probably the longest walk of our section. We're going to go through Cascade Plaza. So we're going to go down Main Street here and then follow us through to the back of Cascade Plaza.
Okay, so actually we are going to want to look behind us. You can't see it, unfortunately, because there's a hill, but the Glendale Cemetery is right behind that, like right over that hill. Glendale Cemetery was established in 1839. And in 1881, it became legal for doctors to dissect human bodies for learning purposes. However, the demand did not meet, or like the source did not meet, the supply did not meet the demand. They were only really able to dissect individuals who were poor and unclaimed. And so the cold season began, in which there was digging of the graves. My favorite story is one in which 3 different doctor groups went on a hunt for a John Henry Hunter. He killed his ex-fiancee and her father, and he pled insanity at in court. And he said that he was hit by, on the head, he had blunt force trauma, and that's why it caused him to kill the love of his life. And so these 3 teams of doctors went in one cold November night to try to get his body to see, okay, what actually happened. One was from Cleveland, and when they saw the Akron doctors, they fled because they thought that they were the groundskeepers. The other was a first group of Akron doctors, and they got halfway through removing the body from the grave when the gravekeepers did come in and kind of chase them off. Secondary group of Akron doctors came and tried to negotiate with the gravekeeper and tried to call a city councilman and went back to the office to talk about how they really needed to have this body. While they were in the office, that first group of Akron doctors came back and stole the body. They did do the autopsy. He was not hit. It didn't show any signs of blood force trauma. And that doctor was actually L.S. Ebright. He became to be very popular and known in the state. He was Akron's postmaster general, the vice president of Akron City Hospital. He was a state representative, and then he was also the state general surgeon. And a body snatcher. That's how it started.
Yep.
It was L.S. Ebright.
Oh, I can look him up.
A classic trope in haunting and scary things is the displacement of people from their land, and then a tendency to haunt those things. That happened recently here in Akron. We've been discussing the Inner Belt project in the community for quite a while, but it's worth going over again. How this failed urban renewal project demolished homes, businesses, and the lives of many Akronites. So this swath is the northeast corner of the 30-acre Akron Inner Belt. And the city has spent a couple decades completely spinning its wheels, proud of that pun, on addressing it. But it's worth a reminder. A bit of background from the Recovering Our Community initiative. Prior to the freeway's construction, this was a vibrant and robust community, benefiting in large part from an influx of workers for the rubber industry. These neighborhoods were home to a significant percentage of Akron's African-American population. Given Akron's location between Detroit and New York, the city was a popular stop for national talent like Ella Fitzgerald and Count Basie. Neighborhood businesses like the Matthews Hotel, one of the few cross-continental rail routes that served African Americans, contributed to the neighborhood being a thriving cultural hub, particularly around jazz music. That all came to an end because of the Inner Belt. The idea of the Inner Belt emerged in 1962. Urban renewal projects across the country broke ground and often targeted areas deemed to be quote-unquote slums. Due to the historic practice of redlining, many predominantly black communities were valued at substantially lower figures as opposed to white neighborhoods. But Akron's Inner Belt was even worse. Cleveland, the best comp we could find for home values around that time were black neighborhoods in Cleveland. The average home value in a black neighborhood in Cleveland in 1970 was $22,000. Homeowners in Akron's Inner Belt, what is now the Inner Belt, but in that neighborhood were offered $5,000 on average for their homes. 737 households were displaced as of 1975, but the displacement continued until the 80s, and documentation was sort of lost. City employees, advocates, local historians, the numbers much higher. And yeah, so that is the Inner Belt project, and we'll see if anything ever comes of that. We are going to walk across the way here to the corner of Main and Bowery. You can go down this weird stairway down here if you want a little spooky ride. It'll just pop you out in the parking garage. Or you can do that another time with a friend and show them that it looks like you're in the TV show Lost. 1923 date is actually the date of that building being built. And that's because this was the site of the city building in Akron, which housed the jail, the mayor's office, and council chambers. On the evening of August 20th, 1900, a young white girl was found wandering on Merriman Road, several miles from her East Avenue home. She was too traumatized from an assault that she could not give a description of the perpetrator. As was common, a black man from out of town was fingered for the crime. Louis Peck was picked up the next day, swiftly taken to jail in Cleveland, as the sheriff and other authorities predicted that a mob would assemble to seek his lynching. Inflamed by newspaper headlines, some of which were printed especially in red for the occasion, groups of men and boys gathered the following evenings right here, downtown in front of the city building. As the evening progressed, the mob grew to about 700 or 800 people. Angry, in full force, and fueled by alcohol from nearby bars, the mob wanted to lynch Mr. Peck, and if not Mr. Peck, they yelled that, quote, any black man would do. The police and the mayor tried to reason with the heckling crowd and informed people that Peck was already taken to Cleveland, to no avail. Officers let committees chosen by the mob, which included council people who wanted to lynch the man, to search the building twice. They tore the whole place apart. They confirmed to the crowd that they could not find Mr. Peck. By this time, it didn't matter. The mob was so agitated that they insisted the buildings be destroyed. They charged toward the city building, yelling and throwing bricks and stones. Police started shooting randomly into the crowd, killing 2 children who were observing from a distance. 8-year-old Rhonda Davidson and 11-year-old Glenn Wade were both shot and killed by the police. This momentarily quieted the crowd, but a fire was started in the Columbia building, which would be down toward where the Civic is, next door, and men started running down Main Street with guns, shooting as fast as they could. A fire alarm was rung, but the mob pointed their shotguns at the firemen and cut the water hoses so that water could not be used to douse the fire. One fireman was shot in the neck as he tried to stop the fire. After seeing what they had to face, the firemen and police officers gave up, and so the mob continued to try to make sure they thoroughly destroyed the city building. They used dynamite twice to try to bring it down. And eventually, a man and a boy went to a neighboring saloon, grabbed barrels of whiskey, poured it all over the floor, and lit that on fire. That saloon was also destroyed in the fire. The whole block went down, basically. The building burned all night and was destroyed. No fire insurance was collected because there was a riot clause in the policy. The Beacon got to watch the entire thing. Former Beacon offices were right down over here in the corner. That building also burned down later. Unrelated. Louis Peck was eventually pardoned because there were serious doubts to his guilt. He was given no opportunity to establish his innocence, and his supposed confession was coerced by police. So, yes, the city was destroyed and 2 children were killed because of a mob 120 years ago right here. This is Chuck.
Okay, and so then you'll see on my left, your right, depending on where you're standing, behind you, is the Civic Theater. It has 3 different ghosts attributed to it. Some history about the theater. It was built in the 1920s. It was known as the, and I'm going to probably butcher this, I'm very sorry, Loews Theater? L-O-E-W-S. Loews. Awesome.
Yeah.
It was built by, or like designed by John Eberson to be an atmospheric theater. In fact, it is the only standing theater that still has a moving ceiling. And so then the 3 ghosts, one is Fred the janitor. He was a loyal worker who died during one of his shifts, and so he is known to haunt the theater to continue his last shift. Story goes that if you are using the restrooms, he gets really mad if you're not doing something you're supposed to in there. So don't do that. There is a well-dressed man in the balcony. He is, not much is known about him. They don't know whether or not he is a patron who used to love the theater and that's why he still haunts it, or if he was an actor who never kind of wanted to leave the theater. But distinctive about him is that his clothing. He's well-dressed and he's in the balcony. The last is a ghost who haunts the outside of the theater. It is a girl who is walking along the canal. She is known to be crying. They believe that she committed suicide by jumping into the canal. And so you'll hear her cries kind of going down the canal as well. Our next ghost story is actually from across the building, the Victim Assistance Building. It looks really new with all the windows. However, behind it is a century-old structure. In 1916, they were blasting rock foundation to build the building that is present. And right next to it is the Crystal Restaurant at Bowery. It was during peak dinner hour, and the explosions were rattling the dishes and the customers. The manager did come out and told them, hey, can you please stop? They ignored him. 5 minutes later, and 2 explosions after, and the building collapsed on everyone inside. 9 died and 3 were injured, and the 9 are rumored to haunt the building. Not a fun fact, but a fun fact, sure. The building that's right next to it, the main palace offices, in 1999, the Civic Theater used to be there, and it was being raised down to build those offices. It had to be halted because the building right next to it said that it was shaking their parking deck and was about to collapse it. So, what comes around goes around.
Yep.
We are going to be crossing the street here, and then going down to, we'll stop in front of the Night Center. So in front of us on this corner here is the Greystone. It is known for Greystone Hall. It is a Greystone building, popularized in the early 1900s. Chicago is known for them. So they were Gothic style. It was built in 1917 by the Freemasons. Some things that are interesting about the building on the outside is if you see these like circular icons, that shows the degrees of the York Rite that they have accomplished. So if we start from the left and then from the right and move to the left, you can see that they have accomplished, so that's your first, the square and compass, it's the general symbol of the Freemasons. Then to its left is the Master Mason, or the Royal Arch degree. That's the keystone. Further on to the left is the Royal and Select Master mark, also known as the Crypt mark, because this is when they started to have a secret crypt or underground room for their records and rituals. And then to the left of that is the Cross and Crown. That is the highest order, so this Masonic temple did receive the Knight Templar degree. Some fun facts about this is inside the lobby, it's still the lobby of the original Freemasons. They have a book in which individuals, when they came in, they would sign in, and they have a symbol next to their name. So each one had their own kind of symbol that they would have. You should, if you get a chance, step into the lobby. It is closed now, we did check, but whenever it is open, it's fun to kind of take a look and see all these names from the early 1900s. Also, the lobby is known to have Egyptian kind of like wallpaper and design, and they do have an Egyptian room up front, but that is original. The lobby was built kind of during the Egyptian revival, and Egyptian mythology and symbolism were popular with the Freemasons. The revival kind of happened starting in the 1798 when Napoleon kind of invaded into Egypt, and then continued up into the early 1900s with the exhumation of King Tut's tomb. Okay, so then once that building, no.
What are you missing? I don't.
Yeah, okay. So prior to this building being built in 1917, it was the Butchell Hotel. It was from 1822 to 1914 dates. And it is well known because Rosario Borgia ran the kind of like mafia gang in Akron. He ran it from the general store in North Hill on Furnace Street, but he did rent out rooms in what was the Bookdale Hotel. He was the head of Akron's Black Hand Society. It was the largest organized crime society in the Midwest at the time.
Yep.
He kind of to capitalize on, again, Akron was a really big hub for workers. People were coming in during the boom of the rubber industry looking for opportunity. So you have young men, a lot of free time, and money. And he then had a capitalized on booze during the Prohibition and women. He got so big that he thought that he could go against the police. He did kill 4 officers, and in 1918 he was arrested in one of his rooms in the book. Sorry, my timer got.
And speaking of a little more on different secret societies or things like that, over here you see a historical marker for the 1936 Akron rubber strike, which is cool. In February 1936, Goodyear rubber workers went on strike and shut down the largest tire factory in the world, which had about 15,000 employees at the time. Much of the picketing happened in this area of downtown, specifically in front of the old armory, which is just a block over this way. But while we're talking about skeletons in the closet, I'm going to quote from Bread Upon the Waters, a 1944 book by organizer and anarchist Rhoda Pizzata. Her tour was personally conducted by Skip O'Hara, who gloried in the title of Field Marshal for the strike. Only 6 months before, I was told, he had been an aggressive leader of the Ku Klux Klan in Akron. Many of the other strikers were Klansmen. The Klan marched here on Mill Street in 1936 in their robes, though their faces were shown because the mayor had ordered that marching members could not wear masks. If you go to our Summit Memory website, you can see a photo of all these Klanswomen happily marching down the street here in their hoods. There's also a really interesting story of them bringing Christmas to a family with their masks on. It's very creepy. The Klan was extremely powerful in Akron. Summit County KKK was the largest regional branch in the country. By 1923, 52,000 locals were members, which is a quarter of the population of Akron. In 1925, the public schools had to begin a, quote, active campaign for liberating our school board from Ku Klux Klan control. The school board president was a Klan member who was changing curriculum and rules in the schools and targeting African American, Jewish, and Catholic sections of town. Membership connections in the KKK were critical for finding a job in Akron. Their headquarters was in a house on East Market Street that is now about the site of community health center buildings. But yeah, I think that concludes our tour. We're going to walk back into the library right next